So the next part of ratio that I want us to work on is simplifying ratios. So to be able to simplify ratios is the learning intention, and we actually do this exactly the same way as we would simplify a fraction. Okay, so here I have our first two examples. So we've got the ratio 6 to 8. Now let's pretend for a second that we had the fraction 6 over 8. So see if I write this up here, 6 over 8. How do we simplify that again? Well, you would work out what's the biggest times table that 6 and 8 are both answers in. Okay, or another way to put it is what is the biggest number you can divide both 6 and 8 by. Remember, it always has to be the same number. Whatever you do to the top of a fraction, you must do at the bottom, and vice versa. So hopefully you've realised that the biggest number we could divide both of these by would be 2. So I would write divide by 2 here to show my working. Now remember, here you're saying how many lots of 2's is there, how many groups of 2's is there in 6? There's 3. 2 times 3 gets me 6. And how many groups of 2 are there in 8? There's 4. Now that's how we do it as a fraction. It's exactly the same way if it's a ratio. Okay, so I show my working like I would each time. So I'm going to write that I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides here. 6 divided by 2 we get is 3. I remember my wee colon. 8 divided by 2 would get 4. And that's our answer. Next one is 12 to 28. So we're looking for the biggest times table that has 12 and 28 as an answer. Or what's the biggest number I can divide both 12 and 28 by. Hopefully some people have got it. However, if you're not too sure, what you can do is you can start small and then double check to see if you can simplify further. So I know that 12 and 28 are both even numbers. Remember, your even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay? And I know that these end in a 2 and an 8, so I know that they're both even numbers. If we kept going up with our even numbers, we would get to 12 and 28. So if they're both even, you can always half them. You can always divide them by 2. So let's try that first of all. So how many groups of 2 are there in 12? Well, there's 6. And then how many groups of 2 is there in 28, or what's half of 28? That would be 14. Now what we have to do, just like when we're simplifying fractions, is we have to check to see if they're simplified fully. Now if I go back to the first one for a second, is there a times table that has both 3 and 4 as an answer? No, there's not. So that's how I knew that that one was finished. Is there a times table, however, that has both 6 and 14 as an answer? Yes, the 2 times table. That tells me that I can divide them both by 2. 6 divided by 2 would get me 3. 14 divided by 2 would get me 7. Is there a times table that has both 3 and 7 as an answer? No, there's not. So that's how we know that we're finished now. Okay, here is some more that I want us to have a go at. So I've got 52 and 4. So I need to think, what is the biggest number I can divide both 52 and 4 by? Hopefully some people have it, okay? But 52 actually isn't in the times tables. It's a little bit too high for the times tables that we're thinking of here. So if you're not sure, again, they're both even numbers. So let's divide by 2. So what is half of 52? Well, let's break it up. What's half of 50? That would be 25. Half of 2 would be 1. So add it together. Half of 52 is 26. And half of 4 is 2. Now again, can we see here that they are both even numbers again? That one's 2, which is even, and this one ends in a 6, which is also even. That tells us that I can half both again. Half of 26, well, half of 20 would be 10. Half of 6 would be 3. Add it together, you get 13. And then half of 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1. So now I'm finished. Okay, there's not a times table that's got both 1 and 13 as an answer. Right, next one, a little bit trickier, but there's a special trick that you can remember for ones like this too. So I've got 80 and 25. Now hopefully we're looking at that 25 and we're thinking, I know a times table, there's only one times table I can think of that has 25 as an answer. But the little trick that you can always use is, see if the numbers end in a 0 and a 5. There's only one times table that goes up 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 and so on. And it's the 5 times table. So if you have numbers that end in a 0 and a 5, you can always divide by 5. So let's put that down. Let's divide by 5. Now one side of this is quite straightforward. It's a times table. 25 divided by 5. So 5 times what gets us 25? That'd be 5. 80 divided by 5 is a little bit trickier. So what you could do is you could just keep counting up in 5s until you get to 80. Or we could do what we did before with division. And we could lay it out as a little calculation. So how many groups of 5 are there in 8? Okay, remember we take it number at a time. So how many groups of 5 are there in 8? There's one group of 5 with 3 left over. Okay, remember, draw your dots. If you're not too sure, draw the dots down. I'll do that quickly actually, just in case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So how many groups of 5 can I get? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one group, and then there's 3 left over. That's why I carried the 3 onto the next number. The next one is, how many groups of 5 are there in 30? Well, that's a times table again. If you look at your 5 times table, 5 times by what gets you 30? 5 sixes. So I'm going to put 16 as my answer here. 80 divided by 5 we now know to be 16. Right, and the next one, so I've got 72 and 20. Now again, if you're not entirely sure what the biggest number is here, you could always start with 2. Okay, again, they are both even numbers because we spoke about even numbers being 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and so on. So this one ends in a 2. This one ends in a 0. Now 0 is also an even number because that's like 10. Okay, or if you start your even numbers all the way at 0, going up in 2s, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8 and so on. So we could divide by 2. Let's try that. So what is 72 divided by 2? Well, half of 70 would be 35 and half of 2 is 1. Add together, you get 36. Half of 20 is 10. Now again, I'm thinking, is there a times table these are both in? Or are they both even again? Well, yes, they are. They end in a 0 and a 6. So I can half them again. So half of 30 would be 15. Half of 6 would be 3. Add them together. 15 add on 3 gets you 18. Half of 10 is 5. Is there a times table that these are both in? Okay, or is there a times table that has both of these as answers, I should say, sorry. No, there's not. And are they both even? Well, no, because the first one ends in an 8 and this one's 5. Okay, 5 is not an even number. If you look at them again, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So it goes from 4 to 6, so 5 is not an even number. So I can't half them again. There's nothing else I can divide by. So that would be my final answer. Let me just fix that. Now, what you could have done though, if some people did realise that there was a bigger number, and I'm going to do this at the side, so we always want to aim to divide by the biggest number if possible. Okay, I know sometimes that can be tricky if they're not answers to times tables, but if we looked at both of these numbers, instead of dividing by 2, then dividing by 2 again, we could have actually just divided by 4 at the very beginning. 20 divided by 4 is a times table. We know that that gives us 5. 72 divided by 4, well, the quick method, okay, to divide by 4 is to half it, then half it again, which is actually what we did right over here, okay? Or, remember, we could have laid it out just as a little division sum, just like that. How many groups of 4 are there in 7? Well, there's one group with 3 left over. How many groups of 4 are there in 32? That's a times table, 4 8s are 32. So there's 2 ways that we could have got there. Okay, you can think of the biggest number, okay, and that's always the quickest way. However, if you can't think of the biggest number, try doing it and then doing it again, okay, see if there's anything else that you can divide by. Now, I want to do just one more example, okay, so I'm going to skip these 2, just going to black these ones out quickly. So we've done ones like that, we've done ones like that. What I want to look at now is these 2 here, okay, I might do 2 more examples. So I'm just going to write question 3 just up here, so I've got a bit more space. So this time I've got the ratio 90 to 35 to 45. So we did this with the last video. You can have more than 2 numbers in a ratio. You can have as many as you want. And this time I want to simplify. So just like with fractions and the ratio so far, you must divide all of them by the same number. Okay, you can't just pick 2 numbers, divide them by a number, and then change the number for the last one. They all have to be the same number. Do we remember the little trick that I said when it comes to numbers ending in 0s and 5s? What can I always divide by if they end in a 0 and a 5? What times table does that mean they go up in? Hopefully we've remembered that that would be the 5 times table. Now let's miss out the first one because that one's a little bit tricky, but the other ones are times tables. So 35 divided by 5, so 5 7s are 35. 45 divided by 5, well 5 9s get me 45. First one's a little bit tricky, but again we could just lay that out as a little division sum that we did last time. So I'm going to do 90 divided by 5. So how many groups of 5 are there in 9? Okay, so again you could draw out your little dots. The other way you could look at it is you could actually look at your 5 times table. If we wrote that out, well 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10. And I'm looking for 9 to be my answer. So it's not 9, but it's in between there somewhere. So there's only one full group of 5 that you can get. So we know that 1 goes up here. Okay. And how many would be left over? Well, 5 ones are 5. We want 9. So there's actually 4 left over. So we carry that forward. And then 5 times by what gets me 40. So it would be 8. So 18 is my answer here. Let's do very last one. So I've got 64 to 8 to 80. And I'm trying to think, what times table would all of these be an answer to? Again, if you can't think of it, these are all even. Can you see that? 4, 8 and 0 at the end of the numbers, so they're all even numbers. So you could always try halving them and then continuing on until you get to its fully simplified form. Can anybody spot what the biggest number we could divide by? It would be 8. Okay, let's try dividing by 8 and see what happens. So 64 divided by 8. So 8 times by what gets you 64? That would be 8. 8 8s are 64. 8 divided by 8, well, 8 times 1 gets me 8. And then 8 times by what gets me 80? 8 tens would be 80. And I know there's nothing else I can do there because 1, I can't simplify any further. Okay, 1's as simple as it can go. So 8 to 1 to 10 would be my final answer. Now, I've actually lied. I want to do one last example. Okay, and I want to do one last one just where it's actually in a worded question, kind of like what we did on the last video. So I want us to write the ratio down and I want us to simplify. So it's joining the 2 pieces together now. So it says a packet of sweets contain 25 orange sweets, 15 yellow sweets and 40 green sweets. Write the ratio of orange to yellow to green in its simplest form. So remember, first thing we need to make sure we read the question properly. So it says orange first. So I write that number down first. So it's 25. A little colon to represent ratio. Yellow is 15. And for green, it's 40. Now, looking at that, some quite big numbers, but hopefully you can remember the little trick I said. So they end in 5, 5 and 0. So what does that mean we can divide all of them by? It would be 5. So 25 divided by 5, all 5 5s are 25, 5 3s are 15, and 5 8s are 40. Now, is there anything else I can do there? Well, no, they're definitely not the answer to any times table. 5, 3 and 8, they don't appear in the same times table. But there's another reason I know that. Can anyone think of the special name for these types of numbers? This one and this one. They have a special name, 5 and 3. Can anyone think? They're actually both prime numbers. Now that tells us a prime number only has two factors, itself and 1. So we know that 5 can't divide by 3, we know that. 3 can't divide by 5, neither can 8 actually. So that's how we know there's nothing else that can be done there. Okay, if you've got two different prime numbers at the end, there's nothing else that can be done. So that's us finished with simplifying ratio. And I want you to have a go at the work that's been set by your teacher. Make sure you ask any questions